Solving equations gets a bit more complicated. You can see we've added this equal signs, and now that we're using variables, it's also more complicated because we need to set what is called a restriction. And the restriction is rules that the variable has to satisfy, so that underneath this radical sign we don't get a negative number, we have a positive number, because you can't find the square root of, let's say, -9. This is different in the case of cube roots, and so you'll find that you have different restrictions. But to find restrictions, what we do is we take this radicand and we say that the radicand has to be equal or greater than 0. And then we treat this just like an equal sign, so we can create a wall if you want. So you have +2 divided by 3, so your restriction ends up looking like x is equal to or greater than 2 over 3. And those are our restrictions. Now that we have our restrictions, we can look at our equation and we can punch in the numbers and figure out what we're dealing with. So first we want to isolate the radical. So to do that, we'll take away 4 from both sides, which gives us root 3x minus 2 equals 12. Then we'll square both sides to get rid of this radical sign, which will give us 3x minus 2 equals 144. Subtract, or add 2 to both sides. 3x equals 146. Divided by 3 and divided by 3. And we're left with x and 146 over 3. You do, however, have to check that your x value does satisfy your restrictions. There will be cases where you have more than one x value, and it's possible that you have an extraneous root, which is a number that works with the equation but doesn't satisfy the restrictions, so you won't be able to plug it into the equation. So to do this, we can either check that this value works in the equation, or it's a lot easier to just say that 146 over 3 is definitely larger than 2 over 3. So it meets our restrictions, and this is our solution. Now, solving an equation with one radical is a little tricky. It's really hard to solve an equation with 2 radicals. First, we're going to find, we'll start with finding our restrictions. So here we know that x has to be larger than or equal to 0. 0 divided by 2 is 0. And here we see that x has to be greater than or equal to 2 over 3. And then we'll just pick, because we can only have one set of restrictions, this is the more limiting restriction, so we will use this restriction once we're done our equation to figure everything out. So to do this, we isolate the most complicated radical. So we'll add 4 to both sides. We have root 2x plus 4 equals 3x minus 2. Square both sides just like we do when there's one radical, and we find ourselves with 3x minus 2 on the right side. And here it's important that you remember that you can't just square these numbers, you have to FOIL them out, because you will have a different answer. 2x times 2x is 2x, and 4 times root 2x is plus 4 root 2x plus 4 root 2x plus 16. Now we have it factored. Simplify it. 2x plus 8x root 2x plus 16 equals 3x minus 2. Now we need to square it again to get rid of this variable, but it would be a lot easier to just bring everything over and try and isolate this radical as much as we can. So we'll take away 16, we will take away 2x, and once we go through, add it to those sides, we have 8 root 2x is equal to x minus 18. Square both sides. Don't forget to factor here, and that will give us 128x equals x squared plus 324. To just convert this equation into a standard form equation, and then we can factor that out. So in standard form, this is equal to 0 equals x squared minus 128x plus 324. Then we punch this into our quadratic equation, and we have x equals 128 plus or minus the root of 15088, 4 times 1 times 324, and minus the square root of 128, and that's that value, divided by 2 times 1, and we're left with x is equal to 128 divided by 2 plus or minus the root of 15088. And after punching this value through a calculator, you get some big gross decimal number, but we do find that the two x values that we get are in fact larger than 2 over 3. So they do satisfy the restrictions. So this is the final answer to our question. It takes up a lot of time, but just be patient with it and make sure you don't make any little silly mistakes. And that's our answer there. So that is everything for Chapter 6, Chapter 5. Just some important things to remember is that when you're adding and subtracting, they need to have the same index and the same radicand. But when you're multiplying and dividing, they only need the same index. They do not need the same radicand. When you're solving for x, you need to make sure that the x value is not an extraneous root, so it must satisfy the restrictions. And make sure that you pay attention with positives and negatives, because they will trick you. You just need to take your time and work yourself through it.